Hi guys, and welcome to Reading with Teachers. I'm Mrs. Gilbert, and today we are going to start with Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I'm going to start with chapter 1. Here we go. Looking Glass House. Kitty playing with a ball of string. Okay, here we go. One thing was certain. The white kitten had nothing to do with it. It was all the black kitten's fault. The white kitten had been having its face washed by its mother, Dinah, for the last 15 minutes. So you see that it couldn't have caused the mischief. But the black kitten had her bath earlier that afternoon. And so, while Alice was curled up in a corner of the great armchair, half asleep, it played with the ball of yarn that Alice had been trying to wind up. And now, the yarn was spread over the hearthrug in knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. "Oh, you naughty, naughty little thing," cried Alice as she reached down, scooped up the kitten, and tangled the yarn and scrambled back into the armchair. She began winding up the ball again, chatting away, sometimes to the kitten and sometimes to herself. The kitten sat on her knee, pretending to watch the winding, and now and then put out one paw and gently touched the ball as if it would be glad to help. Got a picture there. There's Alice and her kitten cat. "I was so angry, Kitty," Alice said, "when I saw the mischief you had done. I was ready to open the window and put you into the snow, and you would have deserved it, you naughty little kitten. What have you got to say for yourself?" The kitten had nothing to say. So Alice went on, "Kitty, can you play chess? Because when we were playing just now, you watched as if you understood everything I was doing. And when I said, 'check,' you purred. Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you'd look exactly like her." Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it before the kitten, but the kitten would not fold its arms. So Alice held the kitten up in front of the looking glass. "Oh, please try, or I'll put you through in the looking glass house. How would you like that? Now, if you'll just listen, Kitty, and not talk so much, I'll tell you what I think the looking glass house is like. If you look through the glass, you'll see that the parlor is just the same as our parlor. Only the things go the other way. I can see all of it when I get up on a chair. All of it except what is just behind the fireplace. Oh, I wish I could see that. I want to know if they have a fire in the winter. You never can tell unless our fire smokes, and then smoke comes up in that room too. Well, the books are like our books, only the words go the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books to the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could get into the looking glass house. Let's pretend there's a way to get through it." Alice was up on the fireplace mantel when she had said this, though she hardly knew how she had got there. Then, like magic, the glass began to melt away just like a bright silvery mist. In another moment, Alice was through the glass and had jumped lightly down into the looking glass room. There she goes. On the mantel, looking at the looking glass house. The very first thing she did was to look to see if there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was pleased to find that there was one blazing away as brightly as the one she had left behind. Then she began looking about. Everything seemed to be the same as in the room she had left, but there were very curious differences. The pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be alive, and the clock on the mantel had the face of a little old man, and it grinned at her. "They don't keep this room tidy," Alice thought to herself, as she noticed several of the chessmen down in the fireplace among the cinders. As she looked closer, she was suddenly surprised. The chessmen were walking about, two and two. She got down on her hands and knees to get a better look. "Here are the Red King and the Red Queen," Alice whispered, for fear of frightening them. "And there are the White King and the White Queen sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are two castles walking arm in arm." I don't think they can hear me. she went on as she moved even closer. And I'm sure they can't see me. I feel invisible somehow. There they are, walking about. Something began squeaking on the table behind Alice, and she turned just in time to see one of the white pawns roll over and begin kicking. She watched it with great curiosity to see what would happen next. "It's my child!" the White Queen cried out as she rushed past the king so quickly that she knocked him over into the cinders. "My precious Lily, my regal child!" And she began scrambling wildly up the side of the fireplace fender. "Regal fiddlestick," said the king, rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He had a right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for now he was covered with ashes from head to foot. Alice was anxious to help, so as the poor little Lily was having a screaming fit, Alice quickly picked up the queen and set her on the table by the side of her noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down. The quick journey through the air had taken away her breath. For a moment or two, she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. As soon as she had recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting among the ashes, "Beware of the volcano!" "What volcano?" said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire, as if he thought that was the most likely place to find one. "It blew me up," panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. "Be careful and come up the regular way. Don't get blown up." Alice watched the White King as he slowly struggled up the fireplace fender. At last she said, "Why, you'll take hours and hours to get to the table at that rate. I'd better help you, hadn't I?" So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across very slowly so that she wouldn't take his breath away. But before she put him on the table, she thought she might as well dust him off a little, since he was covered in ashes. The king was far too shocked to cry out, but his eyes and his mouth grew larger and larger and rounder until Alice's hand shook so much with laughing that she nearly let him drop onto the floor. "Oh, please don't make such faces," she cried out, though he couldn't hear her. "You make me laugh so hard, and close your mouth. The ashes will get into it. There now, you're tidy enough." And she set him on the table near the queen. There he is. The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still. Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done and went round the room to see if she could find any water to throw on him. But all she could find was a bottle of ink. And when she got back with it, she found he had recovered, and he and the queen were talking together in a whisper, so low that Alice could hardly hear what they were saying. The king was saying, "I assure you, my dear, I turned cold to the very ends of my whiskers." To which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." "The horror of that moment," the king went on, "I shall never, never forget." "You will, though," the queen said, "if you don't make a note of it." The king took a large notebook out of his pocket and began writing. There was a book lying near Alice on the table, and while she sat watching the White King, she looked through the pages to find some part that she could read. "For it's written in some language I do not know," she said to herself. There's the king with his notebook. It was like this. Maybe I should just show you. Do we see it? She puzzled over this for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. "Why, it's a looking glass book, of course, and if I hold it up to a glass, the words will all go the right way again." So she did, and this was the poem that Alice read. "Jabberwocky, 'twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the max known foe he sought. So he rested by the tum-tum tree and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame come whiffing through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. It left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, callooh callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the boar groves, and the mome rats out grabe. Here's the pictures. It seems very pretty, she said when she had finished it, but it's very hard to understand. She didn't want to confess, even to herself, that she didn't understand any of it. But oh, thought Alice, suddenly jumping up, if I don't hurry, I will have to go back through the looking glass before I've seen what the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first. She was out of the room in a blink and found herself sliding down the banister and then floating on through the hall. She caught hold of the doorpost and was rather glad to find herself walking again in the natural way. Okay, there's the end of chapter 1. Tune in next time for chapter 2, The Garden of Live Flowers.